welcome everyone to our, I'm seeing a few more. So I'll just keep letting people in as they trickle in. But welcome to our HRAI webinar series brought to you by SalesChoice and Bedford. SalesChoice specializes in achieving revenue certainty for human advantage. I'm Jen Yim. I'm the Senior Director of Product at SalesChoice, and we bring 3 services powered by our AI platform to market. We have Sales Insights, which helps sales professionals with guided insights, Mood Insights, which connects frontline voices to leadership. And third is our AI and data sciences as a service, where we build, design, and maintain AI models with a new focus on generative AI. And over the years, we've been hosting numerous experts on thought leaders on AI and revenue growth, building a trove of podcasts, webinars, white papers, and more. And today I have with us Greg Ketter, Janet Dodge, and Jessica Pezem. Welcome all of you to this webinar. And I'm also want to bring, as people are still trickling in, attention to our next webinar series, which is featuring a guest, Margie Worrell. This will be a webinar on September 25th at noon EST, so same time. There's a link here on the screen, so please just jot that down, and we can bring this, go back to the screen at the very end. For now, I'd like to turn it over to Greg Ketter, if you can give us a quick intro.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Hello, everybody, and thank you for being here. I'm excited. I share with our on how we need to work happy and to be happier, because when we are, we're more productive, we have less stress, people tend to stay at their jobs longer, and ultimately better mental health. So I'm really excited to be here to share and to learn. Thank you, Jen.
Awesome. And Janet, could you give us an intro?
Hi, everyone. I am Janet Dodge. I'm a senior people and culture leader with a background in financial services, technology, and nonprofits. I've had executive roles at the University Pension Plan and Mars Discovery District, where I led enterprise strategies on culture, talent, EDI. And now I work as a consultant where I help organizations be future ready with innovative talent programs. And I'm passionate about creating inclusive spaces where both people and performance thrives.
Awesome. And Jessica.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica. I'm a client partner at the Bedford Consulting Group. We are an executive search firm here in Toronto. And prior to this, I had experience working at CIBC in talent management in a variety of different roles. And in a former life, I was a lawyer, and I completed a law and MBA at Osgood and Schulich. And really looking forward to talking to you guys today a little bit more about this really important topic.
Amazing. And I'd like to turn it over to our Dr. Cindy Gordon to start the conversation. Oh, and you're muted, Cindy.
Yes, that's sometimes not a bad thing that I'm muted. But anyways, welcome everybody. Just really thrilled to be here. And thank you very much to the Bedford Transearch and Howard and Jessica to have a chance to partner with you again. And Greg and Janet, I'm really looking forward to the dialogue with you and Jessica today. First of all, thank you for making the time in your busy schedules. This topic is very near and dear to certainly my heart and our guest speakers today, because we are all pretty familiar with the declining happiness rates, not just on a global scale, but also the impacts we have on our youth. So we've kind of prepared content today, and I'll kind of give you the sense of how we're going to go through this flow. I'd encourage you to think ahead of questions that you might want to ask. I think that's really important so that we can hopefully have a bit of a dialogue. We're going to cover off some of the broader market trends. I'm going to ask Greg to kind of dive in, because he's really an expert in happiness and he's out in the international markets, not only just speaking to different organizations, but also looking at how they're building that cultural muscle. Janet, I really am thrilled that you're here, because you're going to kind of go into the employee engagement perspective as it relates to happiness, lots of focus on involving employees in different ways. And yet we still have a gap in, I would say, really, truly getting the behaviors and that we really want to, achieve. And Jessica, I'm just so thrilled, not necessarily your legal background, which I think is awesome, but the fact that you and Howard on an international scale you're involved with so many CHROs, and the opportunity to say what's top of mind that they have. So that's kind of how we've organized things, and we'll just get underway. So Jen, maybe you can just head to the next slide. That would be great. And I will say I talk pretty quickly because I really want to get into the conversation. So just big picture, if you haven't had a chance to pick up the book by John Clifton, it's a little bit dated. It's about, I think, 5 years old now, but I read this a little bit a while ago, and that became sort of the impetus to say, we have a very disturbing trend. And you can see here that the statistics, if you go into the Global Happiness Index reports, which is a research report globally, we still have some major gaps. The part that is disturbing for me personally is that 20 to 30% of employees wake up in the morning sad or angry. And that's just not good. And that means that they're bringing this stress, and I think with what's going on in our geopolitical environment that we are all experiencing right now in particular, we need people have to find this place to decompress and know that they're feeling safe, and they can't just bottle it up at home. They need to be able to have a chance to talk about these things and get them out in the open. So far more TLC is required. Next slide, please. Now, clearly, when you've got people that are sad or angry on a sort of a macro level, it also transcends to health and wellness, right? I'm not saying anything that you don't already know. However, ensuring that you are fit for duty, that you've got the not just the cognitive skills, but you also are resting at night, sleeping well, and so that you can move into the productive environment. And then if you look at the backdrop of Canada, with so many issues on our productivity rates as a nation, so to uplift our productivity, you got to get into the health and wellness of our talent. Yes, leadership plays a dimension, but there's a lot of, I think, cause and effect dynamics that are really critical for CHRO leaders and HR executives to really ensure that these conversations are not just at the executive level, but at the board level, and that there's sufficient budget and skill development so that we can make the transformation that's required. Next slide, please. This research is a combination of research. It was actually at a session that I was at that Howard and Jessica had organized, and we had in the Boston Consulting Group, and some of the stats that were presented, and one of them that, quite frankly, I wasn't totally aware of, but that 50% of our youth professionals in Canada reported needing help for an emotional or mental health problem. That's huge. But the other thing that's kind of concerning is that 80% of our Gen Zers, that's 80% of our Gen Zers, have left roles for mental health related reasons, compared with 50% of respondents. So there's definitely dynamics on the employee engagement that's required for different age groups, and probably maybe different engagement approaches, so that we are actually, I think releasing some of that energy that's really needs to be, I think, moved into an area that's really, more on the positivity domain rather than maybe on the psychological risk domain. Next slide, please. So just big picture, obviously, probably not sharing everything probably know a lot of the things that I've just talked about. Happiness to me at this stage is looking at also what the World Health Forums have also said, that it's really the root of what really is all about humanity in many ways. So as we're going into this AI age, recognize that maybe the area that will always be very precious is, are our people happy, right? And to have our thoughtfulness around that. So what I'd like to do is to turn it over to Greg to really explore the question of in your workshops and your keynotes that you're doing, how are you sharing the importance of happiness and helping your customers build the courage to bring their full authentic self to work? And we can maybe move to the next slide just as a backdrop, because it's got the definition on it, Jen. So over to you, Greg, just to pull us into the dialogue of the meaning of what is happiness.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Cindy. Happiness is a great thing. Happiness is not the goal. The goal is to be happier, right? Because things come up at work in our lives. Example for me, my dad passed away a year ago. And today is his birthday. So I'm not necessarily happy about that. but there are things that I can do to be happier and to remember. And so when we talk about happiness, AI is a great complement to where we're headed along with happiness, but it's huge. The biggest part of happiness is connection. A recent study just came out where it shared that extreme loneliness is just as bad for our physical and mental health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And that's just by not connecting at work. We're segmented whether we're working at home or together in office. And so there are things that we can do ourselves. 4 out of 5 people on this webinar, that's what this statistic share with us, 4 out of 5 of us are struggling with something along the mental health, whether that's overwhelm or thoughts of suicide or PTSD, whatever it is, right? So 4 out of 5 of us, but also 9 out of 10 of us don't have the courage yet to go talk to HR, to go talk to our managers, to go talk to a friend or a family member and put your hand up and say, hey, I'm struggling with my mental health. So I really share with people how the onus is on us. I have a 20-year-old daughter, and she is still learning that she gets to choose happiness every day. And that's a great thing. So 3 things that I share with my clients, with my friends and my family, anybody who will listen to me talk about happiness is number 1 is mindset. We all have the choice to do what we want with our days. And what I have found is that when I set time aside for myself in the morning and do what makes me happy and sets up my mindset. So I exercise and then I meditate, I read before I even check my emails, before I get online, before I do any of that. That allows me to be in that happier frame of mind. Number 2 kind of goes along is the self-care, right? We need to take care of our own happiness before we can help other people be happy. How can I go to work and show up for my clients authentically and happy if I'm not in the right frame of mind? So take time for ourselves to do that. And then finally, just reach out. When we have these conversations, whether it's around happiness or mental health, when we have a conversation, it kind of drops, excuse me, it drops the barriers. We show empathy, we show concern, and we can have those conversations, whether it's about happiness or mental health, and we can help each other. Next slide, please, Jen. So there's many dimensions of preparing workers in the AI realm. When AI first started being talking about, I was like, this isn't for me. I'm going to do it all on my own. But I think my understanding of AI, it is now helping us do things quicker and sometimes even better. I can log on to ChatGPT and write an outline on how to be happy today, right? Whereas before I would have to go read a magazine or talk to friends and everything. So combining the two, but there's so many good things. When we're working happy, we're more productive. There's less turnover. There's more creativity. Positive emotions are great. Meaning and purpose. When we give our employees the opportunity to do what makes them happy and aligns with their purpose, they're going to be a better worker and they're going to last longer. I was working with one client here in town, and every Christmas they gave away a turkey to every family. They have about 200 employees. Gave away a turkey and $1,000, and which was great for everybody at Christmas time, right? But a couple of people were questioning, well, I don't eat meat. Why am I getting a turkey? And so I talked to them. I said, well, have you asked the clients what they want? And they did a survey, and what they found out was, yeah, the turkey was great. The $1,000 was great. But some people were struggling with childcare. Some people were struggling with groceries. And so they've adapted the information that they got. And now people have the chance to get a turkey and $1,000, or they can get a food voucher, or they can get a check to pay for their childcare. So taking into account what our employees are doing, what makes them happy, and incorporating them, that it'll be better for everybody. And just be cognizant of well-being. One of the clients I worked with, they're an ag company, so a lot of these folks are outside, type A, and they weren't sure how to make people happy and get them to the point where they could talk. And so after my talk, the CEO came up to me and said, how do I share with my employees that I appreciate them? And I said, well, how do you do it now? He said, well, I just send them an email and say thank you. I said, well, there's a couple other things you could do. You could walk by their desk and say hello, thank you. You can write them a note. You could send them a personal text, that kind of thing. And he started doing that. And he called me about a month later and he said, Greg, the most amazing thing has happened. I've connected more with my employees. I shared a story about when I was in college and I struggled taking tests and anxiety. I went to therapy, I got help, and I still use those tools today. And he said within 5 to 10 days of sharing that story, he had 5 employees or 5 managers come up to him and say, my well-being is better, I'm happier, and I feel like I can talk about my mental health. So more connection, more happiness, and taking notice on ourselves using AI. How do we be happier today than we were yesterday? Thank you, Cindy.
Thanks, Greg. I just want to build on a couple of points that you said, and I think one of the key points is really being cognizant of where you are, where you are in the moment, and building that psychological safety with yourself is so important to have that reflective moment. So just thank you. And Janet, Jessica, any questions that you may have of Greg to sort of build on the conversation?
No questions on my end. I actually, when we're going to come around to my question, it builds a lot on what Greg was talking about. So I think I'll say for that point.
What I can offer from my perspective is Greg's point about having authentic connections is really a key point in my experience. With the organizations that I'm consulting with, I'm seeing a huge increase in psychological safety training being part of leadership development curriculums. Our leaders know how to manage work, they know how to understand the clients and get things done. But in the age of AI, the connections at a human level, those skills of empathy and feedback and recognition and making a space where employees can ask for help and ask questions, that's the key skills that we need to help our leaders build. And so a huge increase in psychological safety training, and I think that will help improve the mental health and the happiness of our workforces.
Yeah, really, really good points, Janet. When you think about, this is very much a new dialogue. I think back to earlier in my career, right? It was an early executive, I think at 27 at Citicorp, and we had no training whatsoever on psychological safety. It was always very hard-nosed results, etc. So we're moving into, I think, an area where we have the privilege of being fully human. Right. And that to me is a very exciting pivot. But thank you. Jen, can you go to the next slide, please? So Janet, let's move to talk, obviously happiness is a desired goal. We've talked about the linkages for mental health, productivity as a result, but in roles of leadership in HR where we see that there are VPs of employee engagement that are given accountability to help move the organizational culture forward. Just if you could share some of your perspectives of what does that really mean? What do you think is different in accountability in that role in the age of AI, and any perspectives that you have? And I know you've got a panoramic view of different size organizations, but it's really great to have an expert here that is in the trenches and building these programs and seeing what really sticks or not.
Thanks for the question, Cindy. I'll start with the first part about what is employee engagement. And when we talk about engagement, we're talking about the emotional commitment that an employee has to their organization. When an employee is engaged, they care. They care about their work, they're connected to their teams, they're motivated to contribute, all those things that we want at work. It all comes down to engagement. We've studied engagement a lot in the research. There's copious amounts of studies and research over decades that really tell us more engaged employees with higher engagement, you get higher performance, lower turnover, higher retention, better well-being, stronger cultures. Engagement is really the key building block of healthy cultures. And in terms of how it's evolving, this is a space that's always evolving. It's never been static. If I think back into like the 90s and the early 2000s, we used to measure job satisfaction, and then that evolved to engagement, and then that evolved to like continuous listening programs where we're looking for employee sentiment around their work experience, their culture, new hire surveys. This evolution in engagement, it's not new. It's something that we've always been working at. When I look at the research and I think about what's going to be different in the future now that we have AI, the things that are coming next, I think are going to be focusing on getting employee sentiment about do they think they're doing meaningful work and do they feel like they matter at work? If an employee feels like the work that they're doing is meaningful to them, it connects to their purpose, they're getting joy and pleasure and satisfaction out of their work, that is a baseline. And then when you think about, do they feel like they matter? Is their voice heard? Can they be their authentic selves at work? I think this is going to be the evolution of where we're going with engagement, and new AI tools are going to help us continue to measure that employee sentiment and to get regular feedback.
Thanks, Janet. Do you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah. So this slide, oh, go ahead.
I think you went one further, Jen. Yeah, thanks.
So this slide really captures the business case for why engagement matters, and all the legitimate hard business costs that come when employees aren't engaged. One of the things that I wanted to leave you with is 4 tips around how to engage people in this current state. We know that, like happiness, engagement is at an all-time low. Engagement across all organizations and globally, it's low, just like we see in the happiness report. And so 4 tips that I can give to the CHROs or to the people professionals out there is the work that you do with performance management really matters. The way that you have conversations about performance and how leaders connect with their teams so that they feel like the work that they're doing is meaningful, so that people feel like they matter at the organization. So often, performance management is about the administration, the system, getting those reviews in on time, and we over-index on a process. It's time to shift to the people and having those meaningful conversations so that people feel like the work they do is meaningful and that they are mattering at work. The second tip that I have is about our engagement surveys. It's so important that people know that we're listening. Helping people feel like they matter at work means that we respect the feedback that they give us in these surveys and that we're taking action on it. In the past, it took so much time and energy just to run the survey. It would take months of energy and effort of people teams to just run the survey and report on the results. And then we'd run out of time or energy to do the action planning. If we really want to help people do meaningful work and feel like they matter, you got to take action. It can't just be measuring engagement for the sake of knowing how you are doing against the benchmarks. It really needs to be a time where you show people that you're listening to them and that their voice is being heard. The third point I'll give you about engaging people in 2025 is that it's time to evolve learning and development. The shift from traditional learning programs that are static and standardized, those days have passed. We need to get to a place where we're really empowering people to build skills that they want to acquire and to do so in quick and easy ways with micro-learning and empowering them to make choices. AI is coming. It's going to disrupt our roles. It's going to disrupt our org design. It's going to disrupt our workforce planning. Equipping employees by upskilling and reskilling them so that they are empowered to build their careers, that's going to be a really key thing that helps engage people and retain them in your organizations. And the final point is similar to what I already said. It's about how we're equipping leaders to lead in this day and age. We need to help leaders focus and be able to give real feedback and to make recognition really personal and not just gloss over the hard stuff and move on to the next deliverable because your inbox is full. The role of a leader is so much about the human skills these days. It's about that empathy. It's about feedback. It's about coaching. As we move forward in the age of AI, it's the human skills that are really going to differentiate the leaders that get ahead.
Thanks, Janet. The point on, bringing more of the right brain types of behaviors and skills. I was reading the MIT research just that came out last week, which was talking about the cognitive decline of humans with ChatGPT and the grave concerns that we need to really, make sure we understand our brains are a muscle. And in order for us to stay healthy as humans, we need to work our brains and to make sure we're giving them a good cardio workout. And so there are some dynamics, I think, that when it comes to the literacy side of kind of bringing the man and machine interactions into play that we really need. I think the HR community has an incredible responsibility to lead in these areas. Any builds, Jessica, Greg, on what Janet's just shared?
Kind of tough to go last because I have lots of builds. We're going to talk about them in mine. There's definitely some overarching themes I think throughout today. The only thing that I would say that Janet's point of like AI is coming, I would actually push that a little bit further. AI is here. Like this is um it's not going away. It's here. It's really about how to best use it um to enhance the work experience for your employees, to enhance their engagement and to the conversations that I'm having, like this is very, very top of mind.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. Okay, so let's move to Jessica, who gets to bring this home before we open it up to questions. So, Jessica, you've got the floor just to sort of knit around what conversations that you're having, because you're busy out, you and Howard and your leadership team recruiting to find, the right CHROs to lead the organization forward and the right employee engagement leaders. What are they discussing? What is top of mind? What are their worries? Even beyond the age of AI, right? So there's some probably broader people related and anything on happiness. Is happiness part of the dialogue? I'm just really curious there if that language. I'm well aware that kindness and gratitude is very topical right now, and some interesting developments on, the gratitude side. But anyways, let me just turn it over to you.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Cindy. And yeah, obviously in my line of work, I'm spending a lot of time with the CHRO and the Chief People Officer community, um, navigating what I'd call almost like the next era of work. And while AI is clearly a technological shift, for almost every CHRO that I'm speaking to, they're really framing it as a human shift as well. Because AI is reshaping not just how the work gets done, but how people feel about their roles and what they're going to need from their organizations in order to thrive. So maybe if we can just flip to the next slide, I can talk about a couple of challenges that I'm hearing and the conversations that I'm having at that level. One of the most common themes that I'm hearing is around the fact that I think that most CHROs have figured out the logistics of hybrid at this point, but the human complexity remains. Leaders are still really wrestling with engagement gaps between in-office and remote workers because employees want both flexibility, but they also want connection. And unfortunately, those aren't always aligned. So sustaining culture, collaboration, inclusion, and accountability when teams are scattered, that is still proving to be harder than expected and is still a challenge that people are looking to overcome. But while the hybrid work does remain a foundational challenge, I would say to Greg's earlier point, leaders are also facing a rising tide of change fatigue as well. So we're hearing a real call to reskill leadership, not just to drive performance, but to support teams in what one CHRO actually framed to me as the age of overwhelm. So after years of transformation, remote work, hybrid policies, economic uncertainty, AI is now adding yet another layer of disruption. And people are burned out, they're overstimulated, they're constantly switching contexts. And so leaders really need to help teams prioritize and help to create that psychological safety and protect focus. And these are skills that we have rarely trained for. So it really is a new age from that perspective. Another core issue I would say is what is becoming really an urgent need to develop the skills that are required to thrive alongside AI. Because AI is transforming the way we work, and with it is going to come a very real global skills shortage because people have not done this before. And this is not just a technical gap, I would say, it's also about the adaptability, ethical reasoning, and the confidence to use new AI tools. So the CHROs that I'm working with, they're really focused on learning cultures and not just training programs. To Janet's point, upskilling is going to be critical, but it can't just be a compliance exercise because the conversations that I'm having, oftentimes when reskilling fails, it's not because the content isn't there, it's because it lacks empathy and relevance. And people want to feel that their employer is investing in them and not trying to replace them. And that is a huge concern right now with AI. Um, Actually, one organization where I've seen making a really big difference here is SalesChoice. They've been delivering AI training to board directors and to C-level leaders globally now for, I want to say, 4 or 5 years, really ahead of the curve in terms of the AI market, and really helping to demystify AI and help to build that confidence at the top that really reiterates down through the organization. And as someone who evaluates senior talent every day, I'm really seeing this demanding rise for leaders who can learn fast, who can communicate clearly, who can bring others along, especially as it relates to AI, because that's really what's going to be needed in this kind of transformation.
Wow, Jessica, I didn't expect to get that plug, but thank you. So graciously
Well,
accept
it's
that
the
with-
truth. I do. I only speak the truth when it comes to these things.
Yeah, well, that was just a really nice gift. Thank you so, so much.
Of course.
Any builds, Janet, Greg, that you may have with Jessica's comments?
Yeah, just to follow up on Jessica, what I'm seeing as well too, what you're saying is how do we help make the hybrid work and however we can figure that out to have more of the human connection,
Mhm.
right? Whether it's getting together, even on Zoom, instead of just having one-on-one conversations, let's have a group thing. But I find it again and again and again that as humans, we need more connection. And how can we use sales choice in AI to make that come quicker and faster and better?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I think that, the DEI piece is also quite interesting, because it really is evolving beyond representation and really more towards equity and addressing systemic barriers rather than just, ticking a box. Um, but there is this growing concern around connection, Greg, to your point. And it's a little bit of a quiet concern that I'm hearing, but it's starting to build in momentum. That as AI becomes more embedded, work risks becoming more transactional and more solitary, to your point. And so leaders are really asking the question of how do we preserve community? How do we preserve culture, that sense of purpose? And happiness and belonging and emotional well-being, these are no longer soft topics. These are strategic levers now for engagement and trust, and they're going to be critical to the success of your organization.
Yeah, really good perspective, Jessica. Janet, any thoughts there?
One of the things that I can add to the list is I think chief people officers, they're wearing two hats and they're being pulled in two directions right now. Is they have a role in enabling the organization to adopt AI and to figure out those new structures, how the roles are going to evolve, how you're going to upskill the workforce. A lot of that work is being done with the rest of the executive team and technology. And the people team has a key leadership role around stewarding AI into the organization. They also have the leadership role to play with their own teams. And there is a huge amount of innovation that's possible within the people team as it comes to having, an AI bot to help answer policy questions or to improve the administration of your benefits, to really automate that administration. And I think the aspiration or the hope is that if people teams can use generative AI and agentic AI to make the work easier, it frees people up to have those connections. Just like what Jessica was saying, is that when you free people up by making the work easier, it allows them to manage the technology, have more focus on the community and the connections to strategy. And so there's such a possibility for hope here, but we can't gloss over that there's a lot of pressure on chief people officers to transform how the organization is working as well as how the people team is working.
Yeah, thanks, Janet. I think one of the cases that, as a proud Canadian here is what TELUS has done. TELUS just was recognized by OECD as having one of the most transformative people connections, AI, data stewardship programs. So I wrote about it in my blog, but that's certainly something, if anybody's curious, is really an important point of how they really position data stewardship in all lines of business and build that community recognition. And, people need to feel joy. They have to have an incentive. 50% of society now doesn't trust AI. And so, they're showing up at work mistrusting. So that authentic dialogue and sharing back those stories and building that strength is so important. And I love the fact that everybody's reinforced the importance of feeling heard. Jen, if we go to the next slide, I'm going to try and bring this home and then open it up for questions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've been learning at SalesChoice. 4 years ago, I wrote a grant for the Minister of Innovation in Ontario. We received the grant and we built a new AI software product. I read a book called Permission to Feel after I read the other one. And it's out of Yale, and it was all about the importance of feeling listened to. So if we go to the next slide, started to do some digging into HR practices. Being a former executive, I had a senior roles at Accenture as a global partner in running north and the sort of northeast of North America, and at Citicorp and at Xerox. I knew well about the annual employee surveys, right? But what I didn't know there was that 60% of the data is flawed. Dr. Ulrich, who probably many of you recognize as one of the thought leaders, did a lot of scientific research. So you kind of say, okay, it's too slow, interesting, and yes, we have these programs, but the speed we're running at, can we continue to use those practices? It just kind of opens up a dialogue. Then we've put in employee pulse surveys, right? We just do these little probes where you have a town hall meeting, you do a quick probe, or maybe there's an M&A and you kind of do the spot checking. But all of those are lagging indicators. They're not leading. So with the AI world, everything's leading. It's predicting the future. So if we're looking in the rearview mirror as HR leaders too much, that's not really helping drive the innovation curve, right? So nobody's going to throw away those capabilities. I mean, not too fast anytime soon. I get that. I'm a pragmatist at heart. However, we need to sort of understand that maybe there's other pathways. Huge investments in collaboration, e-learning tools, those are all great things. But there is a shift now to little AI Einsteins being in our pockets, right? And so maybe these agents can tell us in different modalities what's really happening before it happens without doing the formal instruments. So there's just something we need to be experimenting in. So long story short, next slide, we built a product. It's very new. I'm not here to sell too much, guys, but I do want to highlight that some of the things that I think are needed as we look ahead is the organizational structure designs, I do think are going to shift significantly of, where we have AI chief officers, and, data officers. We have too many of those, I think. And the reality is we got to put the muscle into the functional groups so that they have relevance. So that, if you've been using Copilot, and some of you probably are, you would have already learned that to really move ahead, you need to think about the jobs to be done in those specific functions to really build, that kind of extra strength that's needed to drive, I think, a productive outcome. The other piece is, which we've already talked about, is the sheer critical nature of upskilling the boards, the executives, and on digital literacy. And the piece to me is, the language of AI, to me, I look at it as we all had to go through learning financial business acumen if you did an MBA, or if you went back and did some CA related or CPA training. the main point is that you learn what a balance sheet and income statement was, what EBITDA meant. You learn some financial language so that you could speak, with confidence on the business. It's the same thing with AI. It's another set of language, a set of vocabulary that needs to be learned in order to make effective decisions. And that I find is a huge skill gap. Often people thinking that we can rely on our technology leaders for that interpretation, and that is so wrong because we're purchasing products on a daily basis without maybe understanding what's white box or black box AI. And I'm not going to get into too much the details, but my main point is that it is a new language and we need to get going on the language to really remain relevant. There's no question that the people leadership to me is so, so important when I look at the skills, not just of the empathy and the social listening, but I am very concerned on the analytical skills. There was the, I think if you all know with ChatGPT, it hallucinates, right? But most people don't know that the current models deliberately lie as well. And I'm just highlighting that point to let you know that there's risk involved without ensuring that all employees understand. Please proofread, please review. There have been legal cases as well. I was just talking to some of the lawyers here at Gowlings a few minutes ago, where, precedents have been created through AI and obviously judges raking them over the coals, throwing things out because they didn't fact check the sources, right? And it was all fabricated. None of those cases that were in the legal precedents were valid. They were all falsified by AI. So, there's a real need to really think and think critically, and also to manage those risks of these toolkits. And it's by no means nirvana yet. It's a powerful capability, but it's still got lots of warts. Next slide, please. So just a couple of sound bites, then we're opening up. What we built here was basically a social listening platform. And essentially, the real thought process is, can we have real-time data that gives us insight into how people are feeling in very different ways? In other words, not having to go to a survey, not having a pulse, but also having the presence right in where they're at. My big vision is, I think eventually wise CEOs will put onto their, when you log in, just we care how you start and end your day. And I think that's coming. I think to be showing gratitude and kindness, it's got to be an easy reach for that dialogue. So access and where things are located is going to be really important in building these, I think, organizations of the future. Next slide, please. So I care about people and how they start and end their day. I care that the confidentiality is there. This is extremely anonymous, but what's really powerful in the way that these tools are engineered, if you go to the next slide, Jen, is that the correlations. I mean, the real interesting thing is just 3 simple inputs. How am I feeling? You pick an emoji, you can put in a specific classifier as a reason, and then have like a Twitter feed. But it's the analytics that's really interesting, where you can look at mood in relationship to call center volume, utilization. Is there a link? We inherently often have measures to know. We know when the workload's too high. Well, why not have using predictive AI to say, you're going to increase your churn by X% because right now we can already see that those dynamics. So we're getting into a very interesting space where different agents across different solutions can start finding patterns. To me, this is the exciting part of AI, is the rapid ability to plug into different data sets and find patterns just because of 3 other inputs, as an example. Next slide. Everybody kind of measures employee satisfaction score, maybe, NPS related scores on the customer side, but also being able to correlate that with mood. Can you pre-predict the mood that's going to impact way before you have an annual survey? Can you actually, pre-predict things or change things so you actually, in fact, have better scores, obviously, which would be the right pathway, but also customer declines. I think we all know that happier people, interacting with their customers really feel that vibe, right? And the tonality of your workforce as well. When you're not happy, you can't usually fake it, and usually in your voice. when you're really not happy, right? It comes through. Next slide, please. The use case we're solving right now with a fairly large telco is proving out the correlation between sales growth and win rates. A very interesting one. Are happier salespeople more productive, and do they drive more revenue? If we prove this out, which I'm hoping we do, it's a lot of science, it's a very new use case. It means that 20 to 30% of the sales professionals, which we already know have attention deficit disorder, if we can understand how to really, really focus on making those people engaged and really, really happy, what could that do to revenue and productivity? How do companies grow, right? They have to grow through selling their products and services. So again, AI being able to handle, and again, this technology is really for mid to large companies, right? In many, many ways, because you need data. But it's an interesting use case. We'll see how we do. And check back in a year from now. Next slide. So just to close this out, the big, I think, business attribute is, can we pre-predict loss of business correlations in the sense of looking at the mood and actually pre-predict your odds of getting to that growth percentage is very low, and being able to scientifically prove that I think is very, very powerful on the loss of business impacts. I think inherently we all know how important it is to have engaged employees. I mean, we try different things, but looking at tighter control mechanisms and other KPIs that can be derived through AI sources is, I think, a very pioneering area. So I do think that one of the most important skills for every employee is deeper analytical skills. I think that we have a responsibility to uplift the analytical and statistical knowledge of everybody, because that's the world we're heading into in many, many ways, is patterning recognition and patterning formulation at the speed that we've never thought was humanly possible. Okay, that's the end of my little presentation. Not going to process that, obviously. We'd love to show you the product. It's real, it's built. I'm going to turn it back to Jennifer Yim to kind of bring us home on any of the questions that you have. I just want to say personally thank you to Jessica, Janet, and Greg for your thoughts, your perspectives. We have a lot of work to do. The good news is we have a great HR community out there. They care about people. And I'll turn it over to Jen to ask the questions. So Jen, over to you.
Okay, our first question is, with the political climate, and this guest is from the US, how do you recommend suggesting or requesting psychological safety trainings in a time when anything DEI is seen as polarizing and a political threat?
Janet, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because the political pressure right now, it's very real. You can cut it with a knife. It's everywhere you go. I don't know if psychological safety training is necessarily EDI related. I think I would position it as leadership development in terms of engagement and performance through some of the lenses that we've talked about today. Having a leader who's able to understand the sentiment of employees and connect with them so that you can help them perform better. I feel like that's a business case that every executive is going to get behind, is how do you make leaders more effective to drive performance? And sure, I guess maybe some EDI professionals provide psychological safety training, but not always.
I would add to that, there is this undercurrent of fear as it relates to AI, which we've talked about a little bit. Where do I fit when AI can do so much? And, with CHROs right now being asked to lead with empathy and transparency, and building trust throughout this process, not just implementing these tools, I think that the more that we can do to better equip them to help effectively communicate and avoid these fear-driven narratives, the more effective your organization is going to be. And I do think that this fear is just a very real concern right now for so many. They're so concerned that AI is going to take their jobs away, that AI is going to have, these meaningful impacts, because they don't understand why or how it's being adopted. And so that in itself can really erode engagement as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Jessica. Next question, Jen.
Okay. Um, about that, the Mood Insights social listening platform, what's different about it compared to others in the market?
How about if you answer that, Jennifer? You're our head of product development on the Mood product. I'm going to throw it
Mhm.
back your way. Just in case I don't
Yeah.
answer it all right.
Our viewpoint is that it's quite different from the others on the market. A lot of the other tools on the market, including like ones by Microsoft, are kind of collecting the information and giving it to management, but not really enabling the individual user. We like to have a focus on involving like the frontline workers, the person is actually making the submissions, in what are the reasons that they're actually checking against, and having a mechanism for them to use the tool to self-reflect and just to learn, just like, oh, I didn't even realize I've been feeling kind of crummy for 2 weeks straight. Now that I know this, I can like, it's because I did my work this way that I'm feeling so much better. And we've seen workers be able to use that to self-optimize. So we really try to make it a win-win factor for both the organization, who of course wants to optimize productivity and efficiency, but as well as the worker who is interested in having a safe, anonymous, and documented way to improve their own work context.
Thanks, Jen. I would just do one little nippy blip, sorry, can't say the word, build there. And that is we wrote a unique algorithm because we get data. And the problem with data is the sense making, right? So we wrote an algorithm that could parse using LLMs into the data into controllables and non-controllables. Why is that important? Very important because you can only take action on controllable items like the fan is broken, issues that are actually actionable versus courtesy comments. So that's probably a unique generative AI aspect of the power of language in applying some of these tools. But we did have to write our own unique algorithm to do that. So yeah, that's pretty unique. That's probably where our probably strongest IP point is that sense making. Other
Mhm.
questions, Jen?
Yeah. This one's for Greg. You talked about in your travels companies you've seen that are experiencing joy and happiness authentically. Could you share some examples of what they're doing differently?
Yeah, I think most of them are just getting back to the basics and being human first, right? Taking care of your people. If we take care of our people, give them the patterns and tools that they need to be successful and happy, what brings them joy, not necessarily what brings me, the leader, joy or the company overall. But when we have those conversations with each other, when we have more connection, it just it comes back to having that connection and being empathetic and listening. There's so many times where people come up to me, and I'm not a therapist, after I give a talk, people are like, well, I'm having issues with this or that. But people just feel that they need to connect with people and to be heard. I've been married for 8 years now, and I'm still learning to listen and not fix the problem. And I think we need to do that more in work as well too, right? We have to get the jobs done. We have to hit our numbers. But how can I listen? What do you need as an employee to be as happy as you can, and how can I help?
And just reinforcing the listening aspect, which I think is a really important point, that authentic listening that people so desire. Do any more questions flowing in, Jen?
Yep. This one is for I think would be good for Janet. What do you see as the big hurdles in executive leadership behavior, especially with the new cultural expectations of the younger generation?
Glad I got the easy questions. Um, I think being an executive these days, it's tough. The world that we're in is changing so quickly that there's not a playbook. In the past, leaders would always look to the generation ahead of them to learn and to role model. The world's changing so quickly that the things that we learned from our predecessors, they don't necessarily work. So everyone's out of their comfort zone. So there are definitely challenges for leaders. I think one of the things that I'm seeing is the influence of social media. When you think about your social media, my feed is different than your feed and it's different from your feed. There's this customization to a sample size of one. And it speaks to what Greg was saying about everyone wanting to be heard. Everybody wants to be seen and to feel like they matter. And so executives and people teams have been designing kind of broad-based programs and experiences and processes that work for the masses. as we go forward, I think there's an expectation that we curate an individual experience so that they feel that they're seen, that they're heard, and finding that way to bring that into all the things that we do as organizations. I think that's a brand new challenge around creating new employee experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Janet. Yeah. And I think it's hard for me not to think with my geeky mindset, a little cobot agents there that could be curated through the insides of the organization and to be my little advisor, right? And I think there will be different intersections of robotic technology. So as much as we talk about AI, I think the one that's really coming up very quickly are cobots in the workplace and synthetic humans, which is a whole other topic for another day, I know, but it is important we understand that the waves here of change, there's a much broader ecosystem dynamic of smart in everything, right? Jen, any other questions?
Yes, one more. This is about recruiting, so I think it would be good for Jessica. How has the landscape been changing and in your conversations around employee engagement, authenticity, AI, corporate purpose, all of those topics?
Yeah. So listen, I mean, I think that technical competence still matters. It's just table stakes at this point. I think that what we're seeing rising quickly is the demand for leaders who bring that emotional intelligence, that adaptability, that purpose-driven thinking. Especially right now in this age of AI, leaders need to inspire trust because there is a lot of fear out there. They need to be able to communicate clearly and they need to be able to create these cultures of belonging because people want to matter. So I think we're being asked quite a bit to assess that AI fluency, and we're starting to see that much more frequently in our more recent searches. Not necessarily like the deep technical skills, but that willingness to engage with AI strategically and ethically. And increasingly, I would say that boards are really leaning in here and recognizing that AI readiness um, should be part of their good governance, especially at the top. So, do I think that we're moving fast enough? In pockets, maybe, but across the board, no, I don't think that we are quite yet. There are still a lot of organizations that are hiring for yesterday's competencies. Um, and I think that in order to address that, we're going to need to see some real investment in upskilling and inclusive cultures and meaningful work. Because I really do think that when it comes to this, like the organizations that are going to win are the ones that are not just going to adopt AI, but they're going to make people feel really powerful when they're using AI and really empowered in doing so.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. I know Jen, probably at the top of the hour, so I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll just again say thank you to our guest speakers, but Jen, you can close this out and bring us home.
Sure. Thanks, Greg, Janet, and Jessica. It was a pleasure to connect. And I invite our listeners again to join us at saleschoice.com/resources, where we have a lot of content there. And join us next time for Insights in the AI World.